Hi y'all. Today I'm going to show you some basic steps to make your photos pop. I'm going to show you how to use some simple editing steps to take your photo from one like this up here to this down here. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so I shoot in RAW, so I'm going to do the basic beginning edits in RAW, but as long as your photos are properly exposed and everything, you can do these steps in Photoshop. I have another simple editing video up that can show you some of those steps and how to do that in Photoshop instead of Camera Raw if that's needed. But for my photos, I prefer RAW because of the range of editing it gives you. Okay, it's a little overexposed, so I'm going to take that down some. And we're going to go up here to the adjustment brush and change a few things around. So to start with, I'm going to bring a little bit of light into his eyes. So I like to use a little bit of an exposure brush. It's down in size. Bring that up just a little bit. Don't want to go too far, and you only want to do it on the color in the eyes or else it starts to look weird. Bring up the shadows just a touch. And if you want a little bit more of that shiny look, just a touch of the highlights. Pop those up just a touch. I'm going to even out the shadows on his face just a little with bringing those highlights down. Just because that's my preference. But what I'm going to do that's going to make a big difference here is take the exposure brush, get a bigger one, and these areas in the background behind him that are really bright and really distracting. Going to put paint on the adjustment brush in these areas, a little bit smaller behind him. And if you don't know how to change your brush size in Camera Raw, you just hold the right click and up or down, side to side, changes your wheel size or your brush size. So now that the adjustment brush, you can see it's painted only on behind him. I'm going to tone those highlights down a lot. Tone the clarity down some. It softens up that contrast some. Take the contrast down a little. The saturation down a little bit. And because these highlights are so bright yellow, I'm going to tone down the yellows some. And it just automatically makes it a lot less eye-catching. I'm going to use the eraser brush just to make sure that's not on his skin, making him look weird. And if you want to play around with it a little bit more to pull it down more, make it less visible, that's up to you. I'm going to pull this exposure up just a tad here so it's not so dark. And those are just the basic steps I'm going to do in Camera Raw. I'm going to open it into Photoshop. This is what it will become. But this is where we're going. This is what we've got. So I'm going to make that full size. And our first step in Photoshop is always to duplicate the background layer. This is so that we're editing non-destructively. Don't want to make any permanent changes to that background layer that we can't undo later. So there are a couple of ways you can get rid of some distracting stuff in the background. You can use over here the healing brush tool, or if you pull that down, you can also use the spot healing brush tool or the patch tool. The spot healing brush automatically samples whatever's around it and picks what it thinks is the best to use. And sometimes that works really well, sometimes it doesn't. If it's picking the wrong area to sample from to paint with, you can use the healing brush tool. It works the same way. It samples the stuff around it and picks what it thinks is the best color, or you can hold down Alt and click where you want the color to come from and just draw over that spot and it will correct it. Just make sure your brush is big enough to cover the whole spot. I'm going to take some of these orange spots out that are pulling my eye away from him. And obviously I don't want it to sample from up here anymore if I'm going down here. So make sure you Alt click down here. Now these brushes, they use a sample and they kind of mix the colors to get the right coverage of the area. If you want an exact copy, you can use the clone stamp tool. And it is going to, if you hover over wherever you want to sample from, hit Alt click, it's going to take that exact area and paint it on. That's not what you want most of the time. Sometimes you do. Especially if it's not blending very well with the other tools. These are all different ways you can play around. So it can work really well in some situations. But for right now, we're going to use these tools. I'm going to go back to the spot healing brush tool for really simple things like skin. It usually does a good job, and you don't have to continuously pick the area you want it to sample from. So we're just going to clean up his face a little bit. So now his face is all cleaned up. Hit Control-0 to go back to full size. And we get a bigger brush. Clean up the shirt. Very simple. And I pull a few of these hairs off. If it makes weird areas, just click a few more times around, try to make it a little smoother. And this is where you can use your clone stamp brush. Get a little smaller brush, click the area you want to paint from. You can tone the opacity down, that's how visible it is, so that you can just paint over a little smoother. Just watch where it's pulling from, because as you move your brush, it will move where it pulls from. See, you can see the little cursor there showing you where it's coming from, and it will pick up whatever's under that cursor. But you can use that to cover spots or lighten areas. You can play around with those, figure out what works the best for you or what works the best for the area you're working on. Pulling a few of those off to show you how you can clean that up. I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting it really clean. We are going to get this big black spot out of the image here. The one way to do large spots like that is the patch tool. If you've got a big clean area you can pull from, you can use this tool. So it's over here up under the spot healing brush tool. You just draw around the shape you want removed, and then pull it to whatever area you want to sample from. Just make sure before you do this that this patch is set to content aware. That fills it with similar colors and doesn't make an exact copy. If you want an exact copy of the area it's coming from, I'll show you. You could do that too. Sometimes that might work best. In this case, it's going to look weird. Okay, so you can see that didn't work very well. It doesn't blend the edges very well. It basically just copies. So we're going to do it again on Content Aware. It mostly did a good job in here, so we'll clean up those edges. You can try whichever method again you think would work best in this situation. Okay, so now that's gone. We're going to do the same thing over here, clean that up a little bit. Okay, so we've got a pretty clean background. You can take your time a little bit more with that and get it as clean as you like, but that's just showing you how you can do that pretty quickly, pretty easily. So we're going to do a few more things to take it up to this level. Okay, so using our adjustment brushes here, we're going to start with a levels adjustment. Add a little more contrast, bring those levels down just a touch. Those midtones, excuse me. And already that adds in a lot more color and saturation. If you want, you can add a pop of highlights or whichever. One trick I like to use, which I've shown in other videos, take these shadows in your color balance layer, and just add in a little bit of blue. Go to your highlights, add in a little bit of yellow. Warms it up some, brightens it up some, makes those colors really pop. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of darkening in these areas and vignette, and I like to do that with the levels layer. So I'm just going to watch this and get this to where I want it. Tone those whites down a little. I'm going to hit Control I, and it inverts that levels layer. So I'm going to make sure I've got my white paint selected and paint this on the areas, make those a little darker. You can always play around with it some more. You could even take some more of that yellow out if you wanted. Now I'm going to do another for a vignette. So I'm going to lower my midtones a little, lower those highlights down some with a big black brush. I'm going to paint that off of my subject. And there you have it. Hope you enjoyed my video. Thanks for watching.